Do you know that exact moment when everything you've built, your home, your business, your peace, starts crumbling, and it begins with something so stupid, so petty, it's almost insulting? For me, it was a pink plastic unicorn. Not a lawsuit, not a foreclosure notice, not even a health inspection. Nope. It was a $6.99 glittery unicorn toy my 7-year-old daughter Lena brought to the neighborhood park, which apparently shattered the emotional world of a certain Ella Whitlock, age 6, going on full-blown sociopath. I was pulling weeds in our front garden when I heard the crying. Not the usual, I scraped my knee crying. This was weaponized weeping, the kind that turns heads and flips guilt onto the nearest adult with darker skin and a mortgage. By the time I reached the playground, Ella was sobbing dramatically into her mother's Lululemon-clad thigh. Lena stood off to the side, clutching her unicorn, looking confused but not scared. My wife Danielle arrived seconds later, still in her hospital scrubs, the kind of woman who can handle a gunshot wound and a cupcake explosion in the same shift. Then Karen happened. And I don't mean a Karen, I mean the Karen. Karen Whitlock, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, queen of the plastic smile, champion of the concerned voice, and headliner in every passive-aggressive email chain in our neighborhood. She turned to us like we'd kicked her Pomeranian. "Your daughter assaulted mine," she hissed, her voice dangerously low for someone in yoga gear. She mocked her, she pushed her, and she refused to share. Danielle blinked. Wait, she didn't give away her toy to your kid and now we're being accused of assault? I tried to calm things down. I really did. Karen, maybe we can just... She cut me off without even looking at me. Children learn behavior at home, Mr. Hill. Maybe some households around here need a little more oversight. And there it was. Not even subtle. Just straight up, racially marinated contempt delivered with a Botox-stretched smile. And yeah, I should have walked away, should have let it go. But when someone implies your child is violent because she didn't hand over her unicorn to a rich white girl in designer sandals, that's not something you walk away from. That's something you remember. That's the moment you know war's coming. And Karen, she brought it to my doorstep. I wasn't always the guy in work boots and a barn apron arguing zoning laws with a woman named after a haircut. 2 years ago, I was teaching high school biology in Milwaukee, working double shifts and still barely keeping up with rent. Danielle was a trauma nurse back then too, clocking 16-hour shifts and bringing home more fear in her eyes than I ever wanted to see. We were both tired. Tired of the system, tired of the noise, tired of seeing Lena grow up with concrete instead of sky. Then came the miracle. My Aunt Rosalind passed, and as sad as that was, she left us her property in Willow Creek, an old farmhouse with chipped shutters, an acre and a half of wild Wisconsin land, and a barn built by her father in the 40s. The place hadn't seen a coat of paint since Obama's first term, but it was ours. That first summer, I planted tomatoes and tried not to cry when Lena ran barefoot through the clover. Danielle said I looked younger. I started to breathe again. And in that barn, musty, leaning to the left and blessed with the smell of honest work, I found something even better than peace. I found cheese. Not just the cheddar you toss on nachos, I mean cheese. Raw, pungent, earthy, soulful cheese. My grandfather was a dairyman in Mississippi, and I still had his notebooks, back when cheese was something people made in cellars, not in chrome vats with stabilizers and shelf life extensions. I started making it for us, then for friends, then for the farmer's market. Then Lena's kindergarten teacher posted a picture of my pepper jack on Facebook, and it blew up. Within months, Hillstead Creamery, our homegrown, fully licensed micro dairy, was supplying to 4 local stores and taking online orders from as far as Minnesota. I installed a walk-in cooler, upgraded the barn's wiring, filed every permit with a detail that would have made my old tax guy proud. It wasn't just a business, it was a rebirth. My daughter got to see her dad make something real. My wife finally smiled without exhaustion behind it. And that barn, that leaning, stubborn, beautiful barn, it became our church. So when Karen Whitlock came for it, she wasn't just going after a building. She was going after my family, my peace, and the one thing I swore no one would ever take from me again. And she was doing it in the name of community standards. Coming up next, how the HOA used a playground squabble to declare war on Wisconsin's most stubborn cheesemaker, and why I wasn't about to let a woman with pearl earrings and a mortgage on lies tear down what I built with my bare hands. But first, let me tell you just how bad it got before the smell of cheddar became the smell of battle. It started with a letter. Not a knock on the door, not a phone call. Just a crisp, cream-colored envelope in our mailbox with a gold HOA logo that somehow managed to look both expensive and cheap at the same time. Inside was a single page, printed in 12-point Times New Roman, full of buzzwords and threats wrapped in suburban politeness. Notice of violation, unauthorized commercial activity on residential property. Now let's be clear, my cheese wasn't exactly being trucked across state lines in refrigerated semis. We were selling to local grocers and farmers markets, and yes, we had the permits to do it. State approved, city registered, inspected twice a year. We even had a laminated certificate in the barn with a gold sticker so shiny, Lena called it Cheese Hogwarts. So when I read the letter, I laughed. Out loud. Right there by the mailbox. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe Karen got confused. Maybe she thought we were turning the neighborhood into a dairy co-op. Then I flipped the page and saw the kicker. Several residents have expressed concern that your business may be negatively affecting property values and undermining the aesthetic standards of Willow Creek. Yes. Nothing ruins a neighborhood faster than locally sourced Gouda and eco-friendly packaging. I brought the letter inside, dropped it on the counter, and poured myself a cup of coffee. Danielle was prepping dinner, still in her scrubs, the back of her neck slick with sweat from another 12-hour ER shift. Karen's starting early, I said, holding up the letter like a trophy. Danielle glanced at it, scanned the bolded phrases, and sighed. Guess it didn't take long for her to go from unicorn theft to cheese bans. We didn't take it too seriously at first, just more HOA nonsense, but that was before the inspection. The next morning, a man named Blake showed up. Clipboard, reflective vest, boots that looked like they'd never touched dirt. He knocked like a cop. I stepped out onto the porch, wiping my hands on a towel, apron still on from stirring a vat of curds. "You Marcus Hill?" he asked like I might lie about it. Last I checked. He introduced himself as a compliance officer, whatever that meant, said he was there on behalf of the HOA to investigate reports of unlicensed commercial manufacturing. I told him we had our permits, offered to show him. He declined. "I'm just here to observe and report," he said, peering past me toward the barn like it might be full of meth and raccoons instead of milk and mold cultures. "Look," I said, keeping my voice level, "we're a licensed micro-dairy. I've done everything by the book." He nodded like he didn't hear a word. "Your barn's visible from the street. That's non-compliant with Section 8C of the HOA Visual Ordinance." "You mean the same barn that's been here since 1949? "Doesn't matter. If it's being used for commerce and it's visible, it's a violation." I almost laughed. "So if I hang a curtain over the barn, I'm good?" He didn't answer, just scribbled something on his form and walked off. By the end of the week, we had 2 more letters. One about our increased traffic, aka our friend Melissa dropping off empty milk jugs, and another about unauthorized signage, which for the record was a wooden chalkboard Lena made that said, "Try our cheese," with a backwards R. That one hit Danielle the hardest. Lena had painted it herself, wore her favorite overalls, got chalk dust on her nose. She was so proud of it, and now the HOA was treating it like a threat to national security. Still, we were calm. I attended the next HOA meeting, sat in the back like a good neighbor, waited for the resident concern segment, and raised my hand. Politely. Karen didn't even look up from her clipboard. "Mr. Hill," she said, "this forum is not the appropriate venue for individual business grievances. Please submit a formal request in writing to the board." Then she smiled. The kind of smile you give when you've just keyed someone's car and dared them to prove it. I walked out of that meeting with a tight jaw and a firmer step. That was Karen's first move. She didn't just want to shut down our barn. She wanted to send a message. Your family doesn't belong here. Not your business. Not your daughter. Not your joy. And she was just getting started. If the first wave was paperwork and playground drama, the second was all-out suburban warfare. It started with the garbage cans. Yep, garbage cans. According to the new, revised Willow Creek Refuse Presentation Ordinance, a document that mysteriously appeared on the HOA bulletin board 2 days after that tense meeting, all trash and recycling bins had to be stored out of direct sight lines from the street or neighboring lots at all times except during designated pickup hours. Failure to comply would result in a $75 fine per day. Now mind you, everyone in Willow Creek kept their cans tucked beside their garages, including us. But guess whose house got flagged in the very first enforcement sweep? You guessed it. Karen sent Gregory from the compliance committee. Poor guy looked like he hated his life and every clipboard-shaped decision that brought him to my driveway that day. I asked him, real nice, if he noticed that 6 other houses on the same street had their bins in the exact same place. He looked at his shoes and muttered, "I only go where I'm told." The next week it was our fence, the white picket fence Danielle and I had painted together by hand while Lena chased lightning bugs, the same one our neighbors had complimented a dozen times. Apparently it now violated the approved uniformity standards. Funny thing, Karen's own backyard had a wrought iron monstrosity with golden roosters welded into the gate. But sure, let's go after my fence. Then came the parking notices. Danielle's sister parked her car in front of our house overnight during a weekend visit, not even in the way, just legally parked along the curb. We got a warning for extended street occupancy. 2 days later, someone keyed her car. When I asked around the neighborhood, people got cagey. Too many shrugged. A few apologized but said, "I don't want to get involved." Even Mark, the guy who'd begged me for extra blocks of smoked cheddar just 2 weeks ago, suddenly couldn't make eye contact. The rumors had started. About me, about my family, that we were running an illegal food operation, that Danielle used her hospital job to get preferential treatment, that Lena had behavioral issues and had threatened another child. All complete garbage, but Karen didn't need proof, she just needed enough whispers to create fog. The real gut punch came one morning when I found Lena in the backyard, scrubbing her chalk sign with a wet rag. Her little fingers were pink from the cold and she was crying quietly. "What are you doing, baby?" She sniffled. Ms. Karen said it was ugly, and she told Ella it was messy and that's why our house looks bad. I don't want people to hate our house. I knelt down next to her and felt something I hadn't felt in years, not since my mother was stopped by police outside our own home in the 90s for looking out of place. I felt helpless. Not because I couldn't fight back, but because I had tried playing fair. I'd followed every rule, I'd filed every paper, I'd stayed calm at every meeting, and still, this woman had found a way to chip away at every inch of joy we'd built here. Not because of cheese, not even because of Lena, but because someone like me had the audacity to be happy in her neighborhood. Then came the clincher, the letter that made my blood run cold. It was from the county zoning board. A formal complaint had been filed alleging our property violated residential zoning laws. Attached was a petition, digitally signed by 12 members of the Willow Creek community, asking for our micro dairy to be investigated and potentially shut down as a public health hazard. The complaint stated we were producing commercial dairy products without environmental oversight and storing large quantities of animal byproducts in unregulated conditions. Translation? Karen told the county we were running a back alley cheese cartel from a crusty old barn. Danielle and I spent 2 straight days printing permits, pulling inspection reports, calling state regulators, and emailing every department we could think of. Thankfully, the inspector assigned to the case had the good sense to call us directly. After a quick walkthrough and a glance at our sparkling stainless steel vat and laminated sanitation checklists, she actually laughed. "I've seen meat lockers in hospital basements less organized than this," she said. But still, a record was opened, a file was created, and that was all Karen needed to keep the narrative alive. And through it all, she was smiling. Smiling at HOA meetings, smiling at Sunday strolls, smiling as she waved to neighbors who whispered behind her back but never in her face. And every time I passed her house, there she was, tending her rose bushes like she didn't just launch a full-scale campaign to bulldoze my family out of the neighborhood. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I'd already started digging. Not in the dirt, in the records, in the bylaws, in the history of Willow Creek. Because you don't come after a man's daughter, his wife, and his cheese without expecting a little pushback. And Karen? Karen was about to find out that the only thing sharper than my cheddar was my memory. I still believed, maybe foolishly, that reason could win. That if I laid everything out, the truth, the paperwork, the human decency of it all, someone, anyone in this suburban circus would stop Karen before things went too far. So I tried. Lord knows I tried. First, I filed a formal appeal with the HOA board. I followed their exact procedure. 2 copies, signed and dated, mailed and hand-delivered. I included every license and certification, our Wisconsin dairy license, our USDA compliance form, even a signed letter from our county health inspector praising our operation. 2 weeks later, I got a response. A generic email from the HOA secretary. "Your appeal was received. The board has determined that the violation notices remain in effect. Continued operation of your facility may result in further enforcement." No explanation, no meeting, no opportunity to present my case, just a virtual shrug in a Helvetica font. So I called Karen. I didn't want to. I really didn't. But Danielle said maybe, just maybe, this could be fixed like grown-ups. Maybe if she saw how much it meant to us, to Lena, she'd back off. The phone rang 4 times, then, "Karen Whitlock," she said like she was answering from a throne. "Hi Karen, it's Marcus Hill." Pause. "Oh, hello." There was a clink, probably her wine glass hitting the countertop. I wanted to talk, not as HOA president to homeowner, just as neighbors. Things have been getting tense. "Tense?" she echoed like I'd just accused her of genocide. "Marcus, I've simply been doing my duty, maintaining standards." "I get that," I said, trying not to grit my teeth. but you've sent more citations to my family in 2 months than most people get in 5 years. My daughter's crying over chalk signs. My wife's afraid to park out front, and we've built something good here, something honest." Another pause. "I'm sorry your daughter is having a hard time," she said, and I swear I could hear the air quotes around the word daughter. "But your business has caused complaints, real complaints. I can't ignore the community's concerns." "I am part of this community, Karen." She laughed. "Marcus, I think we both know this neighborhood was never designed for commercial enterprises or for unregulated behavior." There it was again, that dog whistle tone, that not-so-coded language. Unregulated. Enterprises. Your daughter. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret, but I couldn't stop thinking about that last word she used, designed. That weekend, I tried going to the city. I drove down to the zoning board with every file I had and sat through 45 minutes of waiting room TV before someone finally looked at me. They were polite, professional, but ultimately useless. "Mr. Hill, we're aware of the complaint," said the clerk, tapping his keyboard like the truth might fall out of it. "But you're in a gray area. The HOA governs a lot of what happens inside these planned communities. Unless they violate a state ordinance or civil right, our hands are tied." "What about abuse of authority? Harassment?" He offered me a pamphlet titled "How to Work with Your HOA" and suggested mediation. Mediation? With a woman who weaponized playground gossip and got my kid labeled as a bully because she didn't want to hand over a toy. I walked out of that office feeling more boxed in than ever. Danielle tried to keep me calm that night, but even she was rattled. "I'm starting to think she wants us to snap," she said, "like she's waiting for you to yell or lose it so she can paint us as dangerous." She wasn't wrong, so I did the last thing I could think of. I reached out to the neighbors, quietly, respectfully, one by one. I dropped off cheese samples like I used to, knocked on doors, talked like a man just trying to save the life he built. Some were supportive, whispered that they loved our brie, that they thought Karen had gone too far, but they wouldn't sign anything, wouldn't attend any meeting. "I just want to keep my head down," one woman said. "I've seen what she does to people who speak up." Even Mark, my old friend from 2 doors down, the one who once called my Gouda the reason I believe in Wisconsin again, now barely made eye contact, said he didn't want to pick sides. Didn't want to pick sides? This wasn't a schoolyard. This was my family, my livelihood, my daughter's joy. And still, no one would step forward. The silence was louder than any citation Karen ever mailed. That's when I realized this wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. This was systemic. And I wasn't just fighting Karen. I was fighting the whole damn lie of what Willow Creek pretended to be. A perfect, polite, picture-frame neighborhood where the grass is always cut and the people always smile, just as long as you know your place and keep your cheese behind the curtain. So I stopped trying to talk, and I started to listen to the whisper networks, to the old HOA meeting minutes, to public records and campaign donations and city permits. Because somewhere in all of that silence, there had to be something Karen didn't want me to find. It started with a single line in an old HOA newsletter. Buried between updates about mailbox repainting and the annual Easter egg hunt, I found a 1-paragraph announcement from 5 years ago. "We're thrilled to welcome Karen Whitlock to Willow Creek. Karen brings her experience in neighborhood development and community relations. While not yet eligible for board nomination, we look forward to her contributions." Not yet eligible. That stuck with me. According to the Willow Creek HOA bylaws, to run for president, a resident has to own property within the community for a minimum of 3 years and be in good financial standing for at least 2. Karen was elected president 18 months after that newsletter, so either she'd mastered time travel or someone helped her cheat. That's when I started digging deeper. I pulled property records from the county website. Karen didn't buy her house. It was technically purchased under a trust controlled by someone named Henry Dorman. Now, to most folks around here, that name doesn't mean much, but if you've ever stood in the dairy aisle of a Wisconsin grocery store, you've probably seen his logo. Dorman Dairy Farms, family-owned since 1952, makers of America's favorite mild cheddar, a phrase so vague it might as well be a confession. See, Dorman's cheese is cheap, shelf-stable, and mass-produced in facilities that care more about volume than taste. And over the last year, they'd been losing shelf space in 4 stores. The exact same 4 stores that started stocking our cheese. Coincidence? Maybe, until I found the donor records. Turns out, Henry Dorman's name popped up in municipal campaign finance filings. He was a key donor to the re-election campaign of our mayor. The same mayor who quietly updated zoning authority guidelines last year, giving HOA boards expanded discretion over residential use definitions. I also found a payment, a $5,000 consulting fee, made to a law firm that helped the Willow Creek HOA revise its bylaws. The attorney who processed the change? A former legal aid for Dorman's agricultural lobbying group. It all clicked. Karen didn't win that election. She was placed. Henry Dorman installed her as his pawn to target our family business. He needed someone inside the HOA, someone with just enough fake charm and unchecked spite to shut us down from within, using community standards as a weapon. And Karen? She was desperate. She owed back taxes in her old county. Her real estate license had quietly lapsed 3 years ago, and the only thing standing between her and a very public, very messy financial audit was him. A week later, I got confirmation. An anonymous envelope appeared in my mailbox, no return address. Inside were 3 scanned documents, a notarized private agreement between Karen and Dorman's trust, listing her compensation as equity participation in community real estate ventures, essentially hush money wrapped in legalese. A copy of her application to the HOA board, falsified to show a fake closing date that made her eligible to run for president, and a single handwritten sticky note attached to the last page. She'll keep going until she ruins you. Don't let her. I stared at the note for a long time. Karen wasn't acting alone. She wasn't just being petty, she was being controlled, blackmailed, and used. And now that I knew the game, I realized something else. It wasn't just about my cheese anymore. It was about corruption, about power, about how one man could twist a neighborhood, install a puppet, and weaponize fear to crush a family business, all because our cheddar had too much flavor. I showed the documents to Danielle that night at the kitchen table. She looked at me and said, "You're not going to let them win, are you?" I smiled. Nope, I'm going to burn their whole scheme down, with nothing but truth, paperwork, and a hell of a lot of Colby Jack. Because Karen might have been the face of the attack, but now I saw the hand pulling the strings, and I was about to cut it off. You know that feeling when everything finally clicks? Not the fake aha you get when assembling IKEA furniture wrong, but real clarity, like you've been walking through fog for miles and suddenly the sky clears and you can see every player, every motive, every piece of the board. That was me, sitting in my barn-turned-creamery at 2 a.m., staring at a corkboard covered in printouts, receipts, and sticky notes, half a wheel of Alpine-style cheddar beside me like a stress ball I could eat. I had the truth. Now I needed a plan, but it couldn't be loud, couldn't be dramatic. Karen and Dorman were powerful in all the subtle ways, the kind of people who didn't fear confrontation because they controlled the stage. No, this needed to be methodical, quiet, surgical. So I split it into 3 parts. Phase 1, document and defend. Before I went on offense, I needed my own house airtight. I hired an attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Rebecca Tillman, who grew up on a goat farm and now specialized in HOA overreach cases. When I showed her the documents and explained what we were facing, she actually chuckled. "You're sitting on a goldmine of violations, Marcus. Let's get your ducks in a row." We reviewed every permit, every business license, every email and violation notice. She compiled it into a clean, indexed file with a cover sheet that basically said, "Back off or bring a lawyer." She also filed a cease and desist letter to the HOA, demanding they halt enforcement actions until a full audit of the board's election process could be conducted. While Rebecca worked the legal side, I took care of the optics. I had Lena's sign cleaned and sealed in a plastic frame and put it right back on the lawn, this time with a laminated copy of our business license beneath it. Let Karen try to claim that was illegal. Phase 2. Expose the puppet strings. Next, I built a file, a real file, with tabs. One for every connection between Dorman and Karen, with dates, signatures, and public record screenshots. I had quotes from past HOA newsletters, voter turnout records, financial transactions, the works. I put together a timeline that made it painfully clear. Karen didn't qualify for HOA leadership. Dorman propped her up. She changed the bylaws under his influence. Their only target? Me. Then, I contacted an old college friend named Camilla, now a reporter for a small but sharp local news site that specialized in community investigations. She loved stories like this, the kind with smiling villains and quiet heroes. "Karen Whitlock?" she asked when I gave her the name. "Isn't that the one who wanted to ban basketball hoops for being visually aggressive?" "Same one." She grinned. "I'm in." Phase 3. Rally the silent majority. This part was the riskiest, but it mattered the most. I couldn't beat Karen alone, and I shouldn't have to, so I went back to my neighbors, not with cheese samples, not with guilt, but with facts. I hosted a backyard open house, literally. Danielle made cider. Lena gave little tours of our tiny creamery. I invited everyone with one rule: no HOA business, just neighbors, just community, just food and kids and conversation. And you know what? People came. Mark from 2 doors down brought his wife and apologized. Actually apologized for backing away. We were scared, he said. She had people spying. We didn't want to be next. I didn't ask them to sign anything, but by the end of the night, 8 families came to me quietly and said the same thing: let us know what you need. So I gave them what they didn't know they needed: the truth. At the next HOA general meeting, scheduled in 2 weeks, I was going to present everything, legally, publicly, and on the record. But I wouldn't do it alone. Camilla would be there with a camera crew. Rebecca would be there with a printed binder and a warning letter for the board. And half the neighborhood would be there, finally ready to look past the perfect lawns and see the rot underneath. Because I wasn't just fighting for cheese anymore. I was fighting for my daughter to feel proud of her home, for my wife to stop flinching every time the HOA envelope hit our mailbox, for everyone in that neighborhood who got pushed around by people who hide their hate behind rules and roses. And the best part? Karen had no idea it was coming. She thought she was dealing with just another angry black man with a barn full of milk. She forgot I also had a file cabinet full of receipts. And 2 weeks later, she was going to choke on every last one of them. The HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday night at 7 p.m. sharp in the Willow Creek Community Center, a building that looked like a ski lodge married a DMV. Normally, about 10 people showed up, mostly retirees who thought next door was too edgy, but not this time. This time, the lot was full by 6:45. You could feel the tension before the doors even opened. Neighbors lingered in clusters, not quite whispering, but not talking loud enough to be recorded either. Some looked nervous, others excited. A few just came for the spectacle. Everyone knew something was coming, they just didn't know what. Except Karen. She strutted in wearing a power blazer 2 sizes too tight, with Ella trailing behind her, holding an iPad and a juice box like a miniature PR rep. Karen's husband didn't show, as usual. I heard he was spending more and more time at their up-north cabin, which is Midwest for avoiding divorce paperwork. I was already inside with Rebecca, my attorney, who was calmly sipping from a thermos like she hadn't spent the day printing out enough legal documentation to kill a birch tree. Camilla, the reporter, was at the back with a small crew. No lights, just cameras, totally above board. Wisconsin's open meeting laws are a beautiful thing when you know how to use them. Karen noticed the cameras, her smile twitched, just a little. The meeting opened with Frank Rutledge, HOA treasurer, occasional accordion player, and the human embodiment of a shrug, calling things to order. They ran through the usual agenda: mailbox repairs, pet waste stations, fall festival volunteers. The whole time, Karen kept glancing at me like she was daring me to speak. So I did. When Frank asked for new business, I stood up. I'd like to make a presentation regarding HOA compliance violations, board eligibility discrepancies, and misuse of community authority for personal business interests. The room went still. Karen's chair creaked as she straightened up. "This is highly irregular," she said, her voice all honey and daggers. Rebecca stood up beside me, cool as ice. Actually, per HOA bylaws, Section 4, Subsection D, residents are allowed to request the floor to present documented grievances during general session with at least 48 hours notice. She held up a time-stamped email. Submitted Tuesday morning. Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped to the projector, I brought one, and clicked on the first slide. Title screen: Undue Influence, How Corruption Threatens Our Community. Not subtle, but subtlety was for last month. I walked them through it piece by piece: Karen's ineligibility to run when she did, the falsified date of homeownership, the trust ownership under Henry Dorman, the campaign donations, the law firm, the zoning revisions, the targeted violations against our business, and only our business. The forged petition signatures, yep, we had evidence. The ties between Dorman Dairy and the sudden push to ban home food enterprises. Slide after slide, I laid it all bare, with receipts. Camilla was capturing every second. Karen turned 6 shades of angry. She tried to interrupt. Twice. Frank tried to gavel it down. Rebecca read from the bylaws. Again. Then came the moment that flipped the room. I played the audio. The clip from Karen's private chat, recorded legally, by the way, where she told a friend over speakerphone, "If I don't get Marcus to shut down, Dorman's pulling everything. He owns my seat, my lawyer, and half the damn board. I'm not going down because of some farm boy mozzarella messiah. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Silence, then a soft Jesus Christ from somewhere in the back. Karen stood up, shaking. This is an invasion of privacy. You're twisting everything. That's illegal. Rebecca stepped in like a sniper. Actually, Wisconsin's one-party consent law allows recording of conversations when one party is aware, which the person who provided the clip was. Would you like to discuss the rest in court or here? Karen's face collapsed, not just angry now, cornered, small. Frank cleared his throat and blinked like someone just rebooted him. Perhaps we should vote on how to proceed. That's when Mark, yes, that Mark, the ex-friend turned fridge ghost, stood up. I moved to suspend Karen Whitlock from her duties effective immediately, pending investigation. Another neighbor, Mrs. Nguyen from 3 houses down, added, and to remove all citations and enforcement actions against the Hill family retroactively. A chorus of seconds echoed from every row. Frank looked at Karen. Karen looked at the door. The vote wasn't even close. And just like that, the woman who tried to turn HOA policy into a personal vendetta was done, removed, exposed, defeated. But I wasn't done yet, because I hadn't forgotten the hand pulling the strings. The next morning, the story hit the local news. Camilla didn't waste time. Her piece, titled Curdled Intentions, How Big Dairy Tried to Hijack a Neighborhood HOA, went live at 6 a.m. sharp, and by 8:15, my phone was vibrating like a malfunctioning cowbell. The article laid it all out. The Dorman connection, the fake HOA presidency, the harassment, the recordings. It even included side-by-side photos of Karen next to a block of Dorman's American cheese product slices with the caption, "Processed, plastic, and no longer welcome in Willow Creek." I might have snorted coffee out my nose reading that one. By noon, it was all over Facebook. A local radio station picked it up. A regional podcast called Scandal in the suburbs reached out asking for an interview. Karen's face, tight-lipped and overexposed, was plastered on half the thumbnails in my YouTube suggestions. Then the real fireworks started. The county clerk's office confirmed that an anonymous tip had prompted a formal investigation into Karen's appointment. Turns out none of her paperwork was in order, not for the election, not for her real estate advisory income, not even for the property trust she claimed to own. Next came Dorman. A second article from Camilla dropped like a wheel of cheddar from the sky. Cheese, lies, and legal ties, the man behind Willow Creek's corruption. She exposed Henry Dorman's efforts to influence local zoning laws, his donations to specific officials, and the string of quiet shutdowns of small dairies in nearby towns that all had something in common. They'd taken a slice of Dorman's shelf space. Turns out our farm wasn't his first target, but we were the first to fight back. That week, Dorman's social media pages went dark. A formal complaint was filed with the state's Department of Agriculture and Consumer Protection. One of the grocery chains, the big one in Madison, publicly announced they were dropping Dorman Dairy and expanding shelf space for local microdairies, including us. Meanwhile, back in Willow Creek, let's just say Karen's name became a punchline. At the community bulletin board, someone pinned a note. Looking to start a new HOA, please contact Karen Whitlock at her forwarding address, under investigation. Gregory, the clipboard enforcer who once fined me for my trash can's visibility, quietly resigned. No announcement. Just a typed note that read, "Health issues. Need a break." Pretty sure his health improved the moment the subpoenas started flying. Frank the treasurer? He skipped town and moved to his lake house, citing burnout, and just like that, the old guard was gone. A special election was held. And guess who was nominated? Me? I politely declined. Committee meetings aren't really my thing. Plus, someone needs to actually make cheese in this town. Instead, I recommended someone better. Mrs. Nguyen, our quiet neighbor who once brought us spring rolls after Lena's tonsil surgery. Smart, fair, no patience for nonsense. She won by a landslide. 2 weeks later, we had our first official community cheese tasting on the lawn outside the barn. Lena set up a stand with her chalkboard sign, now laminated, weatherproofed, and mounted in a tiny flower bed she built with Danielle. We had over 60 people show up. Neighbors brought wine, crackers, homemade jams. Kids played tag. Grown men debated the merits of washed rind versus cloth-bound cheddar like it was a Packers playoff game. Camilla showed up with a camera and asked Lena what her favorite part of being a cheesemaker's daughter was. She grinned, missing one front tooth, and said, "I get to eat mistakes and Dad doesn't yell." Public exposure didn't just bring down Karen, it brought people together. We weren't just the cheese people anymore, we were the community people. And Karen? Last I heard, she was living in her sister's guest house in Eau Claire, spending her days arguing with people on a neighborhood Facebook group and threatening to report teenagers for skateboarding near her mailbox. Her HOA dreams? Officially moldy, just like her legacy. These days, life's quiet. Not boring, not empty, just right. The kind of quiet where you can hear your daughter laughing in the yard while she's bottle feeding a goat named Ricky, where the hum of the cream separator blends with birdsong, where you've got nothing on your calendar except flip the camembert and kiss your wife before she heads to work. The kind of quiet we came here for. The barn, our barn, has never looked better. We finally finished the renovation last month, painted it a deep red with white trim, added solar-powered lighting, and built a proper tasting room inside. Lena calls it the Cheese Castle. I didn't argue. We're still small, still family-run, still stubbornly artisanal, but now Hillstead Creamery is stocked in 8 stores across 2 counties. People drive out from Madison just to buy our triple creme and take a picture next to the Lena's Favorites board she updates every Friday. We hired one part-time employee, a teenager from the neighborhood named Maya who wants to study agriculture. Her mom cried when we offered her the job. The HOA totally transformed. Mrs. Nguyen runs it now with a quiet efficiency that makes me wonder why she didn't take over years ago. The new board is transparent, fair, and get this, they even apologized to us in writing. A formal letter, signed by every member. I framed it and stuck it on the wall next to our dairy license. Karen's name hasn't been spoken at a meeting in months. And Dorman? Last I checked, their factory's still operational, but their cheese hasn't seen shelf space in our town since Camilla's story aired. People around here prefer to know the hands that made their food, not the lawyers who silenced it. Sometimes I still walk that stretch of property between the barn and our back fence just to breathe it in. The clover, the pine, the scent of hay and cream and peace. A few weeks ago, Lena asked if she could design a new cheese label, something just for our community batches. I told her to go wild. She came back with a doodle of a unicorn holding a wedge of cheddar standing on top of a tiny house. The name? Unicorn Justice. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped a whole wheel of Asiago. We printed a batch with her label. It sold out in a day. I'm not saying everything's perfect. There's still traffic, still bills, still goats that refuse to stay inside their pen. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the fight doesn't end with fireworks. Sometimes it ends with a quiet morning, a hot mug of coffee, and the soft realization that the people who tried to break you lost. Not because you shouted louder, but because you stood your ground, steady, smart, and proud. Because you had family and truth and cheese that didn't need artificial color to stand out. And maybe, just maybe, that's what winning looks like. Not a parade, just a unicorn, a barn, and a daughter who knows her worth. That's more than enough for me.